call me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Love moves all night right.
Welcome to Without a Country. I am Corinne Fisher. To those of you who are just joining us, this is a show where we look at the news from the perspective of the right, the left, and we find some truth in the middle. For those who have been with us for a while, hello, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Thanks for working on your critical thinking and your fact checking every single week with me. I am a stand-up comedian, podcaster, and the former 2025 New York City mayoral candidate. One of them, not the only one, obviously. All right. So welcome to the show. This is a pre-record. We usually live stream this show, but I am going to be traveling to Scotland for some work and some play. And so I'm going to be pre-recording the next two episodes. This one, because it is being recorded on Monday, will be a regular news episode. We are recording on Monday, which is August the 10th, just so you guys know if there's any updates that happen after August the 10th. I don't know about them yet, right? We have Alfred licking his crotch a little bit. This is Alfred. Say hello, Alfred. Hello. He's a rescue pup from Pup Stars Rescue here in New York. Adopt, don't shop. Shout out. And and then next week's episode, you have to look forward to one of our evergreen documentary episodes. I am going to go over Chaos, which is the documentary on Netflix based on the book that Tom O'Neill wrote that talks about the Charles Manson murders and, a possible theory that they are related to MK Ultra, which is the secret government, tests to see if they could mind control people, basically, Manchurian candidate-esque. But right now, let's start this show with our enemy of the state. We've been talking a lot about Taylor Farms recently because Taylor Farms, gave many people diarrhea over the past couple of weeks. But it turns out they're also using forced prison labor. And this Mike actually found this story originally, and then I know we don't love Snopes here, but they did do a decent job of fact checking this, so I am going to use Snopes for this. And it says Taylor Farms, like the lettuce company, used prison labor in Arizona, documents show. According to a 2022 report, companies, including Taylor Farms, used a legal loophole for cheap labor from incarcerated people. This is by Joey Esposito. So, Snopes does it in the context of this is the claim. Is it true? So the claim is Taylor Farms, a produce company believed to be the source of the 2026 explosive diarrhea outbreak, once used prison laborers in its workforce. That claim is rated as true. For context, the claim originated in a news report from 2022, and the documentation Snopes reviewed was from 2019. We don't know whether Taylor Farms still uses inmate laborers as of this writing, but we reached out to Taylor Farms and the Arizona Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, and Reentry for comment, and we'll update this article if we learn more. So rumors started circulating this month, August 2026, that Taylor Farms, a produce company believed to be the source of the explosive diarrhea, used the prison force in its prison labor in its workforce. Users on social media claimed the produce supplier was leveraging a legal loophole that allowed it to use prisoners, some allegedly in the country without legal status, as cheap labor in its operation. Some posts allege the net pay rate of incarcerated workers was as little as $150 per hour. And, as it said at the top, this is not Taylor Farms specific. I do a lot of research on mistreatment of prisoners and the absolute mess that is the private prison system here in America. So this is certainly not isolated, but I always think it's important to highlight it. And if people getting explosive diarrhea is motivation for other people to expose more terrible things about this company, including forced prison labor at $1.50 an hour, I say, hell yeah, let's do it. So this, there's this, I guess this is a tweet, right? Not a thread. Yeah, this is a tweet that says, it's from Hillcrest Card Company. And it says, not only is Taylor Farms serving you up a diarrhea parasite with your summer salad, they use forced labor to pick the lettuce. They pay the Arizona Department of Corrections $4.75 an hour for prison labor, and the workers make $1.50 an hour. They are truly an evil. According to documents acquired by the journalists who originally reported the story and reviewed by Snopes, the claim was true. Important context to note is that the claim originated in a report from 2022, and the documentation we reviewed, embedded as a PDF below, was from 2019. We still moderate enough that they knew better, I would say. We reached out to Taylor Farms and the Arizona Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, and Reentry for comment on whether the company still uses inmate laborers as of this writing. The Arizona Department told Snopes via email, ADCRR and Arizona Correctional Industries do not maintain a contract with Taylor Farms. And the origin of the claim is in a report published December 13th, 2022. The Arizona Republic highlighted a legal loophole in Arizona law that allowed undocumented prisoners to be contracted by private companies, despite there being a law against using workers who lacked legal authorization to work in the country because they were incarcerated at the time and not subject to the same protections as employees. Taylor Farms and ADCRR didn't respond to the Arizona Republic's request for comment, but another company named in the investigation, NatureSweet, reportedly said it canceled its contract with the state in 2016. According to the report, a spokesperson said if NatureSweet knew or heard that the Department of Corrections used undocumented workers, it would have taken immediate steps to investigate the situation and ensure full compliance with the law. The investigation was a joint effort by the Arizona Republic and KJZZ, who wrote they analyzed more than 11,000 documents and came to the conclusion that prison labor has become ubiquitous across the state. The reporters built a searchable database that features invoices, contracts, and timesheets connecting ADCRR to private companies. Taylor Farms was listed in the database, but the document its entry linked to appeared to have been removed. However, this evidence shared with Snopes by one of its reporters reveal, and it doesn't say here, but I am guessing that to analyze 11,000 documents, they did use AI. Again, I'm not trying to convince you that AI is amazing, but for things like this, I mean, think of how long it would take a human eye to analyze properly 11,000 documents. So, this is a possible way. And again, it's not stated here, but I'm guessing. However, this evidence shared with Snopes by one of the reporters revealed a 2019 inmate labor report that listed Taylor Farms as one of the contractors with a job description listed as packaged food products. And then they have the PDF here, if you want to actually look at it on the Snopes website. The report was picked up by Prison Legal News, a publication from nonprofit group Human Rights Defense Center, in a piece published June 22nd, 2023. The Arizona Republic reported that at least 18 workers who were hired by private companies, including Taylor Farms, were under detainers from ICE that would typically make them ineligible for legal work in the United States. According to the Arizona Republic, Michael Selmy, a law professor speaking to the paper, said labor rules requiring workers to have citizenship or legal status don't apply to prisoners who state law says aren't afforded labor protections. Summarizing, Selmy's comments, the report said there should be concern that private companies, including privately owned prisons, have been able to use so many undocumented workers in Arizona without oversight from the Labor Department. The 13th Amendment, which it's always good when the 13th Amendment it has to be brought out. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the U.S. except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, has been used by states, including Arizona, to force prisoners into physical labor at low cost to the state and taxpayers. And when you think about that, you go, yeah, maybe we should remove that part, too. I don't know that that's a good, because isn't that then if you could argue that having that in the Constitution then acts as incentive in a capitalist country to send more people to prison. If when you send more people to prison, you get more free or discounted laborers. Just a thought. As of 2022, the Arizona prison labor law specified clearly that prisoners could not be considered employees, whether they are compensated for their work or not. And when you look into the language, it says, no prisoner given a work assignment or required to perform any labor under this section shall be considered an employee or to be employed by the county or the sheriff, regardless of whether the prisoner is compensated or not, nor shall an employee-employer relationship exist between the prisoner and the county or sheriff for any purpose, and none of the rights or privileges otherwise accorded to employees by law shall accrue to such prisoners. According to the Arizona Republic, the jobs allegedly using undocumented incarcerated workers paid at least $4.75 an hour, far below the federal or state minimum wage or what companies would actually pay for the work on the outside. In January 2022, Arizona raised its minimum wage to $12.80 per hour, which is still quite low. Arizona Correctional Industries Futurism pointed out in an August 2026 article about the practice brought back into the spotlight due to Taylor Farms' role in the 2026 Cyclospora outbreak. Arizona labor law for inmates also stated that prisoner compensation shall not exceed $1.50 per hour unless the prisoner is employed in an Arizona Correctional Industries program. ADCRR's for-profit Arizona Correctional Industries, which described itself as transforming from a traditional prison industry into a workforce first agency, is one such program. The company's About page stated that it aimed to be the nation's leading correctional workforce agency where employers, communities, and individuals partner to build safer futures. ACI's page, dedicated in particular to its farming operations partnership, pitched participation in the program to companies under a heading that read, "What's in it for you?" Which is always a good question to ask when you're talking about the full lives and labor of other living human beings. I mean, even, and I'm including animals in this, and answered, motivated workers that can be relied upon to be at work on time, no paid vacation, no paid sick leave, and prepared to work. We truly live in a sick country, a sick world, The website doesn't mention Taylor Farms, but does feature a summary and video of a similar partnership with Hickman's Family Farms, including a YouTube video telling the story of one inmate turned employee which was also named in the Arizona Republic report and appeared in the database. In sum, the information available suggested that the rates starting at $4.75 were likely paid to ACI rather than the prisoners directly, cutting the company itself in on the profits. Well, of course, according to KJZZ, despite their higher pay, prisoners who work for ACI don't get to keep it all. Far from it. The state takes large chunks from their paychecks, forcing them to pay room and board, utilities, and other expenses. Okay. In some cases, prisoners pay upwards of $700 a month to live in their own cells. So wait, is that, I'm so confused. Are all prisoners paying to live in their cells, room and board? Is this like oh my God. Okay, so when you ask, it says, no, not all prisoners pay for room and board, but many jurisdictions allow a controversial practice known as pay to stay, where local jails or state prisons charge daily incarceration fees. These fees do not mean every inmate actively pays out of pocket. Rather, they often accumulate as debt that follows individuals after their release, which is crazy because when we talk about like recidivism, right? It's already so hard for formerly incarcerated folks to get a job. And then, depending on how long you are in the prison system for, a lot of times outside, if it's, a decade plus, technology advances, you're already a bit out of the loop. You're already less qualified than other people because now you have this lapse in your knowledge of technology in a modern world. And you also have this, thing that you were convicted of a crime, you're a felon. This is so we really are creating a trap for people where, we say pay your dues, do the time, but then when we let you out, you're still kind of in prison because of all the ways that we shot you in the foot and fucked you over financially. Obviously, I'm sure your mental health is probably not going to be the best. I know sometimes people come out of prison and they're like, I needed that. I needed to, the strictness or the, similar to like people who come out of the military and they're like, oh, I really needed that structure in my life. And I needed to be like removed from the bad people I was hanging out with. So I don't want to speak for everybody. I know there are people who like are able to come out of the prison system and properly integrate back into, quote unquote normal society. But this seems as like we're really going to set up a bunch of fucking ways to continuously keep you back and probably so that you're going to end up being incarcerated again. And then the Snopes article ends with saying ACI's 2023 annual report showed that the total net assets were just shy of $31 million. What a fucking nightmare. Let's see, deduction from labor. And it's also like, yeah, I mean, it's like, so you're working, you did all this work, I'm guessing you're probably not, most people who go to prison don't have a ton of money to begin with. Oh, Lord Almighty. Okay. Wow. What an absolute mess, but great find, Mike. Very interesting as usual. Quick shout out to all our Patreon subscribers. All hail to our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi. Hello to my capitalist pigs. And hello to my newest cutie, Jordan Tucker. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Patreon. As a reminder, if you guys are interested in supporting this show and all the conversations we have here without bias, without being paid by companies to say specific things, head over to patreon.com/withoutaCountry and you will get an additional bonus news story every single week for as little as $6 a month, plus my undying gratitude because I love kind of making this show with you guys. It's a real community effort. All right. So again, and also, we're recording a ton today. So this episode is going to be a tad truncated, but still of the highest quality. And man, oh man, did the New York Times hand me a gift when it comes to main stories today. I have two main stories I want to go over today. The first is like one of my favorite topics. It's not political, but it is still very without a country in that it requires you to like use your common sense, read through bullshit, and not be mind controlled, right? I'm very on, because of watching that Charles Manson MK Ultra doc earlier today, I'm very in like the mind control headspace. But I did find this article before watching the Manson doc, and it's about Nicole LePera, and one of my favorite topics is debunking charlatans nonsense on Instagram. And there's a lot of these wellness fucking people that I hate. I hate Jay Shetty. I hate Mel Robbins. I hate fucking Huberman Lab. And I fucking hate Nicole LePera. Nicole LePera, I was following her for a hot minute because so many people who I know and I love were following her. And so many people who listen to my shows have mentioned to her. And I say, no, big X. This, out of all the people I just listed, she's the one who I had to unfollow quickest because I go, this woman is pure evil. And I'm actually really, really, I was like alarmed that so many people were following her and didn't I immediately got the heebie jeebies from this woman. And, this is a main story. We could also start a new segment called Corinne Was Right. And the thing with these exposés is obviously like a really hot clickable topic is this person has reached like the precipice of their fame. They have 9 million followers. Everyone listens to them, loads of best-selling books and selling out tours and all this kind of things. Let's create something to bring them down. That's the culture that we live in. Obviously, we love building people. I don't love it, but culture seems to love it. Building people up then to break them down. And so I do want to mention that, right? I do feel like it is impossible that, it's seemingly 50% of the people that we love are actually and have, and the thought leaders in our world are actually terrible, horrible people who had other intentions. Perhaps I think it might be something more nuanced that I kind of saw when I was running for office. That is like, I think a lot of these people probably entered the wellness space similar to how people enter the politics space with a genuine good intention. And then very quickly were seduced by money, by power, by control. And, maybe their initial destination goals objectives changed a bit. I think that would probably be the nuanced take on it rather than, everyone who reaches a certain level of thought leadering is an awful person. I will say it is a bit of my own thought and obviously because of my trajectory, I think it probably would have been a lot more smarter, more lucrative and easier for me after the initial success of GWF to pivot from comedy and go down the self-help wellness lane. I think that's a lot more aligned with the interests of the people who follow me and who listen to that show. As I've said many times before, I do feel like often I've had to convince people to listen to stand-up comedy or like stand-up comedy. That's not all of you, but just in general, I feel like that was more like me saying, this is what I want to do. Please support me on this endeavor. When in reality, a lot of the people who, first came to me are more about self-improvement, a lot of, social, issues, conversations about feminism and all these things I'm, super interested in, but I've never been interested in the wellness space, just because, number one, I am always happy to offer advice when people ask me for it, but I'm very clear that I'm just simply giving you advice based on my lived experience. I think it is a huge responsibility to take people's mental health and the trajectory and course of their life into your hands and say definitively, I know the way, this is the right way. I don't know. I'm a big risk taker, but I don't know that that's a risk I would even be interested in taking. And secondly, I just have always had a moral issue with charging people for that kind of thing, right? I have no problem charging, for my comedy or for a book I write or for, even a web series I make or a podcast I make, right? Because that's I put work and time into creating an art project, and that art is mine and that idea is mine. And while advice is still my idea, I think putting a price tag or gatekeeping your pathway to being more enlightened or to living the life that you want to live is a little bit. It kind of is the opposite of being enlightened, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm also very deep into the TV show Search Party right now. So I'm really thinking about enlightenment and not enlightenment a lot. I don't want to spoiler alert, but that's a topic that comes up. I think we're in season 5 now, which is the second to last season. And it gets pretty crazy later on. But that's where we are now. I have a hard time believing that truly enlightened people are behaving in the way that we see these wellness influencers behaving in. I think that the people who are truly enlightened in the world are in a cave somewhere meditating and only speaking to local people about what they've learned, because I think people who are truly enlightened aren't concerned with things like money and fame. Like, from what I understand about enlightenment, I think those are mortal desires that if you are kind of releasing shadow self, that you're no longer interested in those things. So again, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, if they were offering all these things for free, okay, maybe. But again, that's kind of the amount of time. And then also just like, following Nicole LePera for, I mean, it was a very short amount of time. I got to tell you that I was able to follow this woman. There's other people that I followed that I was able to put up with a little bit longer. I think even Mel Robbins, I was able to put up with a little bit longer. But again, please email me withoutacountrypodcast at gmail.com if you think there's something that I'm, missing. But because I'm not, now announcing this because this expose in the New York Times came out. I am, I've talked about this many times before. And so this is an article that, yes, is confirming my own bias. And so I want to be really open about that. But I think it's interesting that it's gotten to this point. So I wanted to share it. But again, I am biased on Nicole LePera and wellness influencers at large. So it says, a self-help influencer with troubles of her own. Millions look to Nicole LePera for advice on how to achieve contentment and maintain healthy relationships, but her own story is complicated. This is by Genia Belinfante. And it was published on August 2nd, but updated on August 7th. In 2018, after several years of practicing conventional psychotherapy in Philadelphia, Nicole LePera, I could make a joke there about enlightened people don't come from Philadelphia, but I'll bite my tongue. Love you, Philly. Nicole LePera began a new venture, the Holistic Psychologist, an online self-help platform that reflected her growing skepticism toward traditional methods of treating anxiety, depression, and other mental afflictions. And not to say that the mental health industry has it all under control, but when just one person all of a sudden says, you know what, all these hundreds of studies and all this stuff is wrong, and then I'm one chick and I'm going to tell you that I have a completely other way. Red flag. It's very much giving the mental health version of Scientology. At first, it wasn't much more than an Instagram page with a few hundred followers. Within 2 years, there were 1.5 million. A 2020 profile in Forbes described LePera as radically changing the business of mental health. Even listen to this sentence. It's an article in Forbes, so money, business. And the sentence says, radically changing the business of mental health. It doesn't say radically changing the minds of the mentally ill, not radically healing the world. It says radically changing the business of mental health. And I think we're going to put a pin in that. Okay. The Holistic Psychologist had expanded to include a website and, of course, a paid membership service, all of it available to meet the emotional unraveling of the pandemic. Ooh, perfect timing. Lucrative book deals followed. LePera's main message, that we are all capable of healing ourselves, was finding an even more pervasive reception. And not that I don't think that we all have it within us to heal ourselves, but if you are actually mentally ill, you don't have it within yourself to heal yourself. You do need help from other people, doctors, medicine. That's literally what being mentally ill is. Okay. Her chief partner in the enterprise was her wife, Lauren Galvin, known as Lolly, who helped shape the company's identity. Another rule I have, I don't trust couples in business. No, thank you. Early on, they were joined by a third person, Jenna Weekland, who engaged with the online community and appeared alongside LePera in videos and on podcast episodes. Like Galvin, Weekland had no formal psychological training. And that's the issue here. Like, I'm kind of joking about not trusting couples. But basically, if there's one person who has the medical knowledge necessary for something, and then all of a sudden the two people closest to that in that person's vicinity are all of a sudden also on board, well, then there's no checks and balances, because these two second parties, they don't have anything to go off of. They have to follow person one because they have nothing. They have no medical training. So how would the fuck would they know anything different? They have, and now we have one person fully in charge of this new business of mental health. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. At one point, LePera announced on Instagram that she, Galvin, and Weekland were in a romantic relationship together, because of course they were. Let's make this a little bit more complicated. Can you imagine, if there was a list of people who I would be least likely to hand over the taking care of my mental health to, I think a throuple would be number one on that list. I think I would let a child take care of my mental health before I let a throuple take care of my mental health. This is so fucking crazy. Last summer, there was a troubling disruption. In August, a startling accusation appeared on the Holistic Psychologist's Instagram page. Quote, Dr. Nicole LePera has never written an Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. She's spoken since the inception of her career, someone posted anonymously. She is the face of a brand she did not voice. Soon after the DSA? Soon after the post appeared, the Instagram account went dark for a time, and its followers speculated about what had happened. Many wondered about Weekland, who had vanished from the holistic psychologist community about 4 months earlier. Traditional therapy demands a certain anonymity on the part of the clinician, but media therapists, as the psychiatrist and author M. Scott Peck long ago described this segment of the guru class, build their images on self-revelation. Basically like, here is my healing journey. Doesn't this sound good to you? Let me sell it to you, right? And it's hard because a lot of people I know and love, are media therapists. There's a lot of media therapists I work with, know, and love. It's not so much that they're not anonymous anymore that I have the problem with. I kind of, as someone who is very openly for her whole life been pursuing fame, there is a part of me that thinks that a media therapist, which in my mind is a mental health professional who is trying to chase either fame or money, because those are the only two reasons that you would be on social media. I guess the third would be to spread your knowledge and to heal, but I don't fucking believe that. Not that it can't be a third thing, but I think even if you have that thing, it has to be attached to either the money or the fame, right? And like as someone who's actively pursuing fame, the last thing I want, the last quality I want in someone who is helping me with my mental health is someone who even has the itty bittiest interest in fame. In fact, it's like a real trigger for me anytime I'm in therapy. Anytime I've been in a therapeutic space and the clinician who or whoever has even shown a bit of interest in being famous or being publicly known, it really immediately discredits them for me. It really, really does. All right. So given that LePera had shared so much about her own life online and in her popular self-help books, it was logical that her followers would be curious about what had changed. The story became, and also, when you're putting your life out here like that, you're then held to impossible standards because, right, just because you're a mental health expert doesn't mean that your life is going to be perfect, right? You're still a human being and you will have the peaks and valleys of any human experience. But, I think part of the reason that we really need our clinicians to be anonymous meaning like that we need to not know about their lives is so we can't judge them in that manner, because it's an impossible test to pass. It's very much like just like there's no perfect victim. I think there's also no perfect therapist. So it's really better that we don't know, I mean, you guys, if you listen to GWF, you guys know the amount of times that I've looked up therapists on Instagram, and every single time I regret it. The story became clearer earlier this year when Weakland sued LePera and Galvin, arguing that her role in the Holistic Psychologist was foundational and that she deserved significantly more compensation than she had received. LePera and Galvin then filed a lawsuit against Weakland, accusing her of misusing company funds. The civil cases, which include allegations of assault, were soon accompanied by police reports. All of it suggested that LePera's life was marked less by an acquired serenity than by instability and crisis. LePera, which is this is the foundation for basically any good therapist. That's why they got into the business. That's why we can't know the backstory, LePera had landed in uncomfortable contrast to her own advice to quote, choose people who bring peace and contentment instead of chaos and suffering. Wow. Rock bottom. In her writings, LePera describes growing up in a household overlaid with anxiety. If her parents were late to meet her, she assumed the worst, that they had died. I feel that. As she tells it, LePera often found her needs subjugated to those of a much older sister who suffered from chronic illness. Their parents met problems in a spirit of agitation, whether they were one ingredient short for dinner or in the throes of a domestic emergency. Catastrophizing was the family's default mental state. Wishing to hold their attention, LePera worked hard at everything, efforts that led her to Cornell University. So she's a very intelligent person on paper. That doesn't reveal whether someone has any street smarts whatsoever. And a doctoral program in clinical psychology at the New School for Social Research in New York. She was drawn to attachment theory, which posits that the bonds we develop with parental figures in infancy and early childhood determine our relationship styles in adult life. Meeting Galvin was a turning point. She, quote, felt right, as LePera put it in her book, How to Do the Work, Galvin challenged, How to Do the Work. That's the title of her book. Sorry, the sentence was written weird. Galvin challenged LePera in ways that excited her, she wrote. Together, they built a life in Philadelphia where LePera had grown up and now ran her practice. Her clients were rich people and poor people, stressed out professionals, and the formerly incarcerated. No matter who they were, they felt stuck, she observed, wanting change but failing to enact it. More and more, she felt the same way. And I do want to give her kudos. I do love that she was taking in clients from different fiscal backgrounds. I think that's another problem, especially in the world of, media therapists. I think, demand for these people becomes higher and higher because they're in our faces via our phones every single day. And so they become a bit of a celebrity. And then you go to book a session with one of these people, it's $500, $600 a session. And then you go, okay, well, not that rich people don't have problems and not that rich people don't deserve to be helped. They absolutely do. But I think this is yet another way, I want to make sure that no matter what your financial status is, you have the access to the same level of care. That's what I sometimes worry about. The issue crystallized, becoming her rock bottom. She would write about 13 years ago, shortly after her 30th birthday. On vacation with Galvin, she suffered an acute bout of despair. I didn't know despair was a medical issue. She began connecting her physical ailments, stomach trouble, fainting, panic attacks, to the childhood tensions that conventional therapy had failed to resolve, right? And this isn't like a particularly new concept. We all, know the most famous book probably about this is The Body Keeps the Score. Like, we know that stress and hike in cortisol levels can make you physically ill. We know that. With Galvin's help, LePera undertook the slow and steady work of repairing her body and mind. The couple began every morning with meditation. They studied nutrition and lifted weights. They married and imagined the new professional path that led to the creation of the Holistic Psychologist. Eventually, she started talking about nervous system dysregulation rather than mental illness, a designation she had come to question. Meaning, like, she questioned whether mental illness was a thing at all. Okay, guess she's never met a stand-up comedian. Weakland's lawsuit against the couple surfaced as a matter of online conversation a few months after it was filed. So it did little to interfere with the launch of LePera's latest book, Reparenting the Inner Child, which arrived in March as an immediate bestseller with an effusive endorsement from, guess who it was? That's right, it was Mel Robbins. LePera's book, if you're going to be charlatans, you got to be charlatans in a pack. LePera's book tour included appearances at the Royal Geographic Society and London and the 92nd Street Y, Manhattan's epicenter of bourgeoisie cultural exchange. It's fun. I've been there to see conversations. On stage in New York before a sold-out crowd, LePera was interviewed by Ellen Vora, a Columbia-trained psychiatrist who called her, quote, a guiding light for the culture. That night, as she had in the past, LePera presented herself as someone who, although still at work on herself, had overcome. I would see someone that hurt me and I would immediately understand why they did it. From their childhood, the wounding, she said, explaining an unhealthy tendency she had to empathize in excess. Oh, I love a bleeding heart empathizer. LePera, 43, talked about reparenting herself. She had taken an extended break. And also, just so you know, if someone's 43 and telling you that they've completely overcome, they're absolutely full of shit. As someone who is currently 40, I would say I'm like just at the tip of kind of maybe starting to understand what life is about. The fucking tip. Okay. LePera, 43, talked about reparenting herself. She had taken an extended break from her family to explore who she was. It was hard, she said, but here too, she seemed to prevail. And this is interesting because, again, this is absolutely not to discredit anyone who has needed to cut ties with their family members, whether it be parents, brother, sister, whoever it is. But what I will say is there's really been an uptick in recent years of people who have needed to cut off their families. And I gotta be honest, you all didn't need to it's not possible statistically that you all, the only way you could get through what you had to get through was cutting ties with your family. I know you're feeling anger right now. You're saying, well, not me. I did me, and maybe you did. I don't know your individual story, but I will say it's become really trendy, and people will say, just don't talk to your parents extremely flippantly. Okay. And for someone who was, just talking a paragraph before about how fucking empathetic she was, in modern times, we certainly have a real lack of empathy for our parents. Again, I know, easy for me to say, I have good parents and I really love them. And I think they did a good job. That does not mean they were without fault, but, I am judging them based on a lot of things. I'm judging them based on the tools that they had, the environments that they grew up in, their particular interests and pursuits. I mean, overall, it's impossible to be a parent who doesn't at least fuck up your kids a little bit, because just like a parent is in charge of human life, and human life is innately going to be fucked up unless you lock yourself in your apartment. And then even then you'll have mental health issues, I would think, or feel the best you have ever had in my case. Her father was seated in the audience and she pointed affectionately toward him. God bless. What was reparenting exactly? Vora, it was probably a paid actor, her dad, right? What was reparenting exactly? Vora asked. It was, quote, showing up in a different way for ourselves, LePera answered, being the supportive, caring, attuned caregiver that very few of us had in childhood. And again, as far as reparenting, it's okay, I think that I had a really good childhood and I think my parents did a really good job. That doesn't mean that there weren't points when I reparented myself, because the vision I have for myself is at points, or has been at points, different than the vision that my parents had for me. And that's okay. I'm raising myself how I would raise it, would want to raise a child. In these continued years of raising yourself, because I think I'm still raising myself. I think we all are, right? Derived from the pop psychology of the 1970s, the idea was hardly original to her, but she had revived it for a new generation. And that's what we see so often in this wellness space. These are not people who are creating new ideas. They're taking old ideas and they're revamping them. We see it in politics too. We've gone over it so many times with old ideas that Trump has taken and absolutely just rebranded. We see it in, we also see it in art all the time. Old idea, rebranded. Nothing is new. The guided meditation. LePera's first experience of celebrity occurred in the summer of 2019 when she decided to conduct an inner child meditation oceanside in Los Angeles. The turnout astonished her. I mean, did it, babe? You're in Los Angeles. These people are thirsty as hell for that kind of thing. Weekland, a frequent poster on the Holistic Psychologist's Instagram account, was among those on the beach in Venice that August morning. At 32, she was a recent transplant to Los Angeles from Colorado, where she had worked as a nurse's aide in a pediatric oncology unit. Although she arrived too late for the session, Weekland met LePera and gave her a deck of oracle cards, which, if you guys aren't fucking following along, oracle cards are like the sister cards to tarot cards, okay? That's the first you hit the tarot cards, then if you want to get even deeper, you go into the oracle cards. A lot of times oracle cards, you can use oracle cards as a deck alone, but oracle cards, you don't have to use that rider weight, the suits of the rider weight deck. If I'm talking to you and it seems like I'm speaking a different language. This is just something I know a lot about. Whereas oracle cards a lot of times will be thematic, right? And so you might pull an oracle card and it'll be in more plain English. Like instead of saying like, Three of Pentacles, which is a suit in the, which is the suit in the rider weight deck, or a part of the suit, it would say like fulfillment, love, destiny, and then you would interpret the oracle card based on that message. I like all of these things. I like tarot and I like oracle cards. When tarot and oracle cards start being brought into a space that claims to be a mental health space, no. These are different things. To me, that is no different than if you're, than when people are sent to specifically like Christian therapists. Like sometimes, that to me, these are different things. I think they are two things that you can use to, help you navigate your life. One is fucking science. The other thing is religion, which you can believe in it till you're blue in the face. And there's certainly things I believe hard in. We have absolutely no proof that there is any legitimacy to these things. And again, I'm someone who believes in some of these things. And I'm not like a person who doesn't believe in God, but just like at the end of the day, you don't really know. You don't know. You can say, you can say you feel Jesus in your heart. You don't really know. You don't. Soon they began messaging each other, or at least that is what Weekland assumed. Later, she came to believe that she had been communicating with Galvin, she told me. LePera and Galvin declined interview requests sent to them through their lawyers, as well as LePera's literary agent and book publicist. When asked by phone about specific allegations, one of those lawyers said she had no comment and hung up. The Holistic Psychologist took shape as a website with LePera as the face of a startup devoted to mental fitness. With Galvin, she expanded the franchise to include the Self-Healers Circle. At $20 a month, the cost, which is now $26, was roughly equal to what 4 or 5 minutes of individual therapy would set you back in Tribeca or West Hollywood. Beyond monthly Q&As with LePera, the circle offered members a range of online events, lectures, and somatic practices. It's also a great opportunity for if, one-on-one, your therapist isn't giving you the answers you want. It's always great to step into a community that might be more apt to yes and whatever it is you want to believe. When the site went live, so many people tried to enroll that the external server crashed. Weekland sent a message offering to help and was immediately hired. Telegenic and open in her effect, Weekland started appearing on camera, heading some of the circle's content teachings in which she shared her own story as a child of parents immersed in poverty and addiction, people testifying basically, to the Lord in court, same thing. With LePera, she co-hosted Self Healer's Soundboard, a podcast that ran for 2 years. Not long after starting her job, Weekland received an invitation from LePera and Galvin to spend part of the holiday season with them. Landing in Philadelphia after Christmas, Weekland made her way to the Four Seasons, which is where all healing happens, I think we know. In a single room with 2 beds, the couple laid out gifts for her, Weekland said. Later, they decamped to an Airbnb in the Poconos, where on New Year's Eve, Weekland recalled that they drank, smoked weed, and kissed. Again, good boundaries, it seems. Weekland quickly fell for both women. With them, she said she felt chosen, which, again, if you listen to GWF or just know anything about relationships, one of the most dangerous things to feel in a relationship is that you are chosen, or to chase this feeling of wanting to be chosen. Absolute recipe for disaster. Unless you were talking about choosing yourself. And that does not mean that you can't be in relationships with other people, but this feeling of being chosen, no. By July 2021, they had moved into a rented stucco house in Scottsdale, Arizona, where they bought a bed large enough for 3. I'd love to be at that shopping adventure. LePera announced the new configuration on Instagram. I am in a throuple, the post began, a 3-person committed relationship. She had been reluctant to share this, she said, but she and her partners had promised to be transparent, authentic, and candid about who we are. And I do want to point out, these are 3, by relatively, generic social standards, these are 3 hot ladies in a throuple. Okay, so money, money, money. Media loves this, right? A few months into the arrangement, Weekland grew close to a next-door neighbor, Jennifer Colasar. From the beginning, Colasar said in an interview she overheard arguments coming from the backyard, some of which frightened her daughter. Jenna once said, "Can you hear us? What can you hear?" Colasar told me, and I told her I heard a lot of accusations. Colasar told Weekland that she was particularly struck by her partner's habit of constantly telling her that she was the problem. Still, Weekland's role in the company was growing. In 2023, she signed an agreement with LePera and Galvin, giving her a 1/3 ownership stake in Junior Teen, the parent company of the Holistic Psychologist. The audience for the Instagram account grew to 9 million followers, delivering a constant churn of aphorism along the way. Some of the posts were philosophical, sharp, even poetic. Grieving the death of a parent who is still alive means realizing the person you needed never existed. Others were confounding. Not knowing that you are hungry is a core sign of unresolved trauma. And I will also say what I find a lot, because my algorithm, because I read a lot of stuff like this, even if I don't necessarily believe in it, I like to educate myself in quotes on it, because, how can you educate yourself on made up gobbledygook? But so often what I see is, let's make something that I think 80 to 90% of the population can agree isn't a real problem above what it actually is, and turn it into something related to trauma or loss or grief. I see a fuck ton of that, right? Not knowing that you are hungry is a core sign of unresolved trauma. What happens when we Google this? What does it even say? Not knowing. It usually to me means I'm really I'm really busy doing something and I forget to eat. Not knowing you are hungry. Oh my God, this stuff gives me a headache. So it is. Let's say they're trying to tell me here. This is for people who forget to eat for long periods, not like a meal. But these are from nonsense websites. Oh, okay. This is why I got to be careful with AI, because guess what? The first video that I get when I type in that theory, it's the Holistic Psychologist, with a video from a fucking week ago. Yeah, these are all just ladiesnames.com when you write that in. the first real website that I'm getting when I type in "not knowing you are hungry is a sign of unresolved trauma" is to the National Institute of Health. But that is talking about the relationship between trauma history and eating disorders, which to me is completely different than the just forgetting to eat. So again, be wary that, of what you type in. All right. LePera's popularity was also fed online by videos in which she used role play to illustrate her insights. In vignettes on maternal narcissism, LePera typically portrayed both the stunted mother and the yearning child now grown up. But for a while, it was Weakland cast as the young daughter victimized by an oblivious mother. In a standard scenario, Weakland is on the floor, hair in pigtails. That's already so fucking weird as an adult, clutching a stuffed penguin. In one clip, her character explains that she feels loved only for her accomplishments. That won't matter when you're at Harvard, LePera responds, demonstrating the worst possible parental reaction. Other videos had Weakland acting as the patient to LePera's therapist. Given the underlying power imbalance of our actual relationship, Weakland said, those just made me feel sick. She struggled to leave. For so long, I'd try on everything Lolly and Nicole told me about myself, all the criticism, the opinions, the diagnoses, which is a very, dangerous route to go on. Sometimes like as someone who like, I really do try to listen to what people say within reason, without caring about what people say. If as it relates to me, I care about what people say about their own needs, wants, desires, things that they want to see in their society. I don't care about what people say about me, but being in the public eye, I think it's like you do get a lot of feedback, and people trying to diagnose you. And so sometimes if I heard the same thing a lot, I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe I will look into that. And let me tell you what a huge mistake that has at times really derailed my life. Not like hugely, but like it is so when people are diagnosing you, I mean, every now and then we have like a Ron Funches story where, people watched him on the Traders and, said he was autistic and then he went and got tested for autism. But a lot of times I think diagnoses, especially when it comes to women in society, are actually just based in cruelty and projection rather than real medical knowledge. So if you're someone in the public eye or even someone who is like in a space where you get a lot of feedback about yourself, it's always nice to like entertain these things in the quest for self-improvement. But I would really, 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 really be very wary of that. Because in my unless someone's an actual like licensed clinician or something, like if they're just basing it on like their own, let me pull this out of my ass, they're probably just projecting something that remains unresolved within themselves, and you should just kind of put your fingers in your ear and go la 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 la. In March 2025, she moved out. There's stills from these videos and they're very weird, the pigtails ones. And the lawsuit. Late that spring, Weakland flew east to stay with friends in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. She didn't want LePera and Galvin to know where she had gone, but suspected she was being tracked. Okay. Hoping to throw them off, she sent a delivery of cat food to one of her previous short-term rental addresses in Scottsdale and asked her friend Colasar to pick it up. When Colasar arrived, she told me she saw LePera and Galvin in a car outside the building. When Colasar returned later, she said the couple was still there. Weakland's host in Gettysburg, an epidemiologist, said that Weakland had told her about the incident right after it happened. It just blows your mind that these are the people who are presenting themselves as self-help, Colasar said. Despite the conflict, again, just another reason, like it's okay if you find people's stories inspirational or motivational or even aspirational. But when someone brands themselves as like, I have overcome, I know the path, I know the way, whether it be in wellness, self-help, religion, whatever it is, unless they're like 105 years old, I'd be really wary of that. Despite the conflict, LePera joined Weekland in Gettysburg in July. They stayed with Weekland's friend, who described LePera as relaxed and happy during her visit. Weekland and LePera had never spent so much time alone together and grew closer. Later that summer, Weekland and LePera were back in Scottsdale. It was against this backdrop that the anonymously written Instagram post claiming that LePera was the face of a brand she did not voice appeared. In fact, Galvin had written it, as she and LePera later admitted in their legal filings. This was not Galvin's first expression of volatility. In 2012, according to New Jersey public records, an order of protection was taken out against her in a domestic violence case. Several years later, Galvin came under the scrutiny of Pennsylvania regulators, who fined her $3,000 for diverting money from a GoFundMe she had ostensibly set up to help the homeless into her own bank account. Okay. LePera and Galvin were now living together again. Weekland saw the couple for the last time in October 2025, she said. They talked about the company. The conversation got tense, so tense that Weekland ripped LePera's glasses off her head, something she regrets. Oh my God. In their suit, LePera and Galvin said the incident had left LePera legally blind? What? In retaliation, Weekland maintains in her own suit, LePera pushed her down a flight of stairs. LePera and Galvin have denied this. That evening, Weekland went to an urgent care facility to be treated for a bruised and swollen ankle. A week later, on October 14th, still bruised, she visited a naturopathic doctor, Sabrina Salt. Okay. In an again, just probably not the doctor you want to go to if you have a bruise. In an interview, Salt said that Weekland had shared her claim that LePera had pushed her down the stairs. Salt said she had prescribed peptides to increase blood flow to the joint. On a few occasions when we spoke, Weekland teared up when talking about how much she had loved her former partners and how she could look at them still and see the troubled girls they had been. Weekland remained on the payroll until January of this year, when she was fired. In February, she filed her suit against the couple in Arizona Superior Court for breach of contract. She argued that her role in the company entitled her to at least $3.5 million, an amount she said she based partly on the 2023 partnership agreement. In a reply to Weekland's lawsuit in March, LePera and Galvin claimed the figure was outrageous, adding that Weekland had often failed to deliver materials on schedule and that her role had been merely administrative, a position complicated by Weekland's appearance in the company's content. You got to get all this shit in writing, guys. Keep records. In May, LePera and Galvin filed a lawsuit against Weekland that lists junior teen as the plaintiff. The suit paints Weekland as angry, lazy, and manipulative. LePera described her differently in her 2023 book, How to Be the Love You Seek. Quote, Jenna quickly established herself as an essential member of our team, she wrote, bringing communication and leadership that complemented the strengths Lally and I had. I would love to be a lawyer on this. And then it's like, it's like the court documents say one thing and you're like, actually, in your own fucking book, you described this person as yada, yada, yada. Among Weekland's claims is that she helped brainstorm the books and should receive some profit. Yeah, again, you got to get that in writing. But in their response, don't be giving out ideas for free if it's not in writing. But in there or record, depending on what state you live in and if you're allowed to do one party consent recording. But in their response to Weekland's suit, LePera and Galvin stated all books were written solely by LePera. A spokeswoman for Flatiron Books, which published Reparenting the Inner Child, said the book was written, quote, with a ghostwriter. Hilarious. Taken as a whole, the documents what's the conversation with LePera and the ghostwriter? Hey, I want to sell a bunch of nonsense to women who are going through a really hard time. Inner child is really hot right now. So can you write an entire book of nonsense about that? Thanks. Talk to you in a couple months. Taken as a whole, the documents provide a view of unhinged behavior among the women I will tell you, I have the same rules for self-help books because I've read self-help books, of course. I have not, it's not, they're not my favorite, honestly, but I find like I find more success in reading books that are not meant to be self-help books as self-help books, but that's just like my kind of approach to the whole thing. But I also have read traditional self-help books, and especially when it comes to like relationship structure and stuff like that. And my number one rule, similar to what we do a lot on this show when we're reading news articles about how we Google the journalists before we dive in, especially when we're doing like an op-ed piece that we're reading, I have the same exact rule for self-help. Do a little research on who you're getting the self-help from before you really dive into that self-help. Because so many times people have told me like, oh my God, this person, you got to read their work. Me, Google, look it up. And it's like, oh, this person had crazy religious beliefs and also believed in like Nazis were king. And that's like real shit that I found. And again, I don't know, it took 5 minutes of research. So just be really careful. Taken as a whole, the documents provide a view of unhinged behavior among the women who seemed fixated on arguing and surveilling one another. Weakland acknowledged that all three had frequently recorded their fights. Oh my God. In her suit, Weakland maintains that Galvin threatened to release private recordings of her, including nude videos, and that LePera did nothing to stop Galvin's extortionist threats. The couple, in response, claimed that Galvin had not threatened to send nude images, but rather videos of Weakland being physically abusive. Weakland went on to file a complaint regarding the matter with the Scottsdale Police Department. LePera has filed her own report with the police, maintaining that Weakland improperly used her credit card last year to make thousands of dollars worth of purchases on Amazon and elsewhere. Weakland denied the claims. In their lawsuit, LePera and Galvin further alleged that Weakland had misappropriated a total of more than $1 million of corporate funds for her own use. Weakland denied this too, saying in an email that the expenditures were all business related. $1 million of business expenses. Okay. Those issues have yet to be resolved. But in court in February, Weakland won a protective order against Galvin, effective for 2 years. The petition included her contention that Galvin had entered her backyard, peered into her windows, and sent her images of her trespass. In legal filings, Galvin and LePera denied Weakland's interpretation. LePera's continuing influence invites the question of how much it ought to matter if your therapist, either someone you see in person or a public figure you have come to rely on, lives a life very different from the one he or she is trying to help you achieve. If the treatment is succeeding, should it be of any consequence? Central to the field of medical humanities is the Jungian idea of the wounded healer, a figure whose own pain becomes a vital instrument in curing others. Sure, but what if the healer's own pain seems insurmountable or corrosive? At the end of LePera's talk at the 90-second Why, you know what? I got to go to one of these. Someone email me when the next one. I'm so sad I missed it because I would really love to do some investigative journalism on this. Audience members were given a chance to ask questions. One woman got up and said she had done everything, all the journaling, all the self-interrogation, and was still not where she wanted to be. LePera smiled in commiseration. The saying that many of us love to hate is that healing isn't linear, she said, and that is real. If I paid money to have someone tell me healing isn't linear, I would be so fucking pissed. Just recycling absolute gobbledygook. And yes, of course, healing is not linear. Grief is not linear. All these things are not linear. I don't know. Are we in a time-space continuum? Maybe life itself isn't fucking linear. Maybe time isn't linear. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Now I kind of want to read all her books and do an entire series about why Nicole LePera is fucking full of shit. Not that I want her as an enemy, because she seems absolutely fucking psychotic and scary. And I can only imagine her disciples coming after me, probably worse than the Swifties and the Bay Hive together. All right. Anyway. Wow. So interesting. I'm gonna stay on top of that story. But again, I mean, we did the Huberman Lab one a while ago on this show. I'm on the edge of my seat for the Jay Shetty one, unless there's something I missed. Probably already did some expose on him. What comes out if I type in Jay Shetty? Sure. I mean, we know Mel Robbins is like stealing things from other people. Mm-hmm. All right. Plagiarism allegations. Yeah.
I was going to say, doesn't this story seem like, just what Hollywood's been waiting for to cast Ana de Armas, Sydney Sweeney, and Alexandra Daddario in like one movie together where they can all be in a throuple trying to like blackmail each other and
fuck, but also like, yeah, intermittent fucking for sure.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you get the fuck, you can literally direct this like a porn, right? It's like we got the one-on-one with you, now the group scene. You've betrayed her, she's betrayed, you know what I mean? Like the beats of this
for sure.
Like, you can get 90 minutes of compelling drama with those three women on screen, all making out like every 10 minutes or so.
Absolutely. And as I prefaced before I went into this article, we love to tear people down. We especially love to tear women down. And, to your point, America loves, lesbianism and a cat fight. That's how many reality shows are basically based on let's get women to fight each other. Whether it be Housewives where they're fighting each other over God knows what. I can't even follow the plot lines on those, or like, fighting over men, like on these, relationship shows like Love Island and things like that people love. So I do want to point that out. But
Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo both having number 1 songs about the same ex.
Right.
Like,
interesting.
America loves that kind of thing.
We really do. I love that kind of thing. But less about, I'm not going to either of them for mental health. So it says, for Jay Shetty, it says the monk backstory. An investigative report by The Guardian scrutinized Shetty's claims of spending 3 years living as a strict monk in an ashram in India, suggesting the timeline and immersion were significantly exaggerated or spent largely in London. He zoomed in. That's really funny. Okay. I mean, there's tons of videos that's like Jay Shetty's full of shit, but I mean, it's so funny because there's a YouTube video that says Jay Shetty is full of shit, but then you go a little bit deeper and you say, who's this video by? And it's by Nicole LePera, who I unfortunately have known in the past a little bit personally, who is also fucking crazy and full of shit. And again, I don't like to call women crazy. That's a person who's actually crazy. I don't even like that I had to say her name on today's podcast. I don't want her anywhere in my fucking sphere. Allegedly, she's a crazy fucking cunt. What a wild thing. Okay. Anyway, when did she do that? Oh, she made that video 6 years ago. All right. Moving on. All right. So, again, email me anything that you guys know. I am, these fake wellness influencers is truly one of my absolute favorite topics. Another favorite topic is, why is the middle of my lipstick coming off so easily? Whatever. We'll think about it another time. All right. So it just happens that the universe served me another one of my favorite topics this week. And this is something that is getting a lot of traction. We've talked about it before. It is one of my absolute favorite topics, and that's the online backlash against birth control. Again, going to preface this by saying you guys absolutely know that I do have a bias towards this, but this is something I've been tracking for a long time. I certainly have a bias, and I've been thinking for a long time that I really didn't like how there was so much negative press going on around birth control. I do want to preface this by saying, obviously I've heard many women's stories over the past decade on GWF about their experiences with birth control. And so I just did a little bit of research on if hormonal birth control negatively affecting mood and mental health is something, that has been studied in a fair way, because we all know that the medical industry continually underserves women, right? We so many times studies are done with the man being like the primary person that we're studying this on, and then we're like, oh, and I guess we'll apply what we learned in this study that we did on a man to women too, and things that are medical issues that are like specific only to women, a lot of times get way less funding and are way less looked into. I did look a little bit into this before we get into our articles, and the kind of what's considered the landmark study about the birth control pill and its effects on mood and mental health is a 2016 Danish cohort of over 1 million women, which found hormonal contraceptive users were significantly more likely to be diagnosed with depression or start antidepressants than non-users. And the effect was strongest in adolescents in the first 6 to 12 months after starting. A UK biobank cohort study found something similar. Elevated depression risk was highest in the first 2 years of use, then attenuated over time, though never users still had a somewhat higher lifetime risk. Though ever users still had a somewhat higher lifetime risk than never users. But randomized controlled trials, which has been the gold standard, have generally not found an increase in depressive symptoms in adult users over several decades. And a Columbia University study using national US survey data actually found hormonal contraceptive users reported fewer depressive symptoms than non-users at the population level. The current expert consensus, and this shows up in multiple review papers between the years 2024 and present 2026, is something basically like large-scale, high-quality data does not support a strong overall population level link between the pill and depression, but there does appear to be a real biologically plausible subset effect concentrated in adolescents, people starting or switching methods of birth control, and people with a personal or family history of mood disorders. And that's the most interesting part to me, right? So it's not at all to say if you experienced something that you felt like depressive or a mood change when you went on hormonal birth control. I'm not saying that you didn't. I am merely recommending you that maybe you look into, because again, not a doctor, not trying to get into the wellness space, but like I might just want to present to you that perhaps it wasn't that the birth control, rather than doing it to you, triggered something that was latent in you to begin with, which would be the family history and the predisposition for mood disorders. Actually reminds me a lot of the Lindsay Clancy case, right? When we're talking about mental health, it's like where we're talking about how giving birth to a child and parenthood can trigger things that are laying latent in you. And it's not that they're creating the mood disorders or the mental health, but it's like they can trigger them. And had you not experienced motherhood, parenthood to begin with, those things wouldn't have been triggered ever. That's all I'm suggesting. And then it goes on to say progestin-only methods and higher androgenic progestins show up more consistently in research than others. So, it's kind of like there is a meaningful subgroup of women who have experienced a real biological response, especially in the first year of birth control. But, there's certainly, we don't have a way to predict that in advance yet. And it certainly should not be a reason why you fear birth control in general. I then also looked into a little bit, just because this is a claim that I've heard a lot of places, but it was actually presented to me independently. I think maybe before GWF even existed, or maybe at the very beginning of the show, probably before we got into conversations this deep. And this is something that I've now since seen circulating a lot online, and it was presented to me by my acupuncturist. But I will say that my acupuncturist is a licensed MD, or was. I don't see her anymore. This was years ago, but she is a licensed MD, right? And so the thing is that this theory that who you're attracted to changes when you stop use of the birth control pill. This is based on a very small body of evolutionary psychology research from circa 2008 to 2013 that suggests that the pill, meaning the birth control pill, suppresses the ovulatory shift towards preferring more masculine features. And we see it a lot on TikTok and on Instagram because it got a lot of pop science coverage. But later in 2018, there was a much larger and better designed study in psychological science, specifically designed to replicate those findings from 2008, 2013, that found women's face preferences were stable regardless of pill use or cycle phase, and concluded the earlier small studies were likely underpowered, methodologically flawed. And it was just kind of something that caught on because, yeah, I mean, isn't it a lot more easy to blame a pill on why we're making bad choices in our relationships rather than to blame ourselves? Boom. Because I was like, I performed this study on myself. I think I talked about it on GWF, but years ago, it was when I was dating James, God help me. And I went off the birth control pill, which I had been on consistently since I was 18, for 3 months, because I researched what's the amount of time that your body needs to basically reset, and to see if it changed who I was attracted to, right? It was probably my body being like, leave the relationship, but I wanted to do a little scientific study. And I saw absolutely 0% change in who I was attracted to. Again, I know I am only one person, but that's why I looked into this a little bit more. So again, this is not to say like your life is a lie and everything you think and everything you've read about yourself or researched is, untrue. But I am very wary of like when science or like, especially like women's health stuff becomes like trendy and we see it again and again. And when it's not backed by scientists. Not that scientists are always 100% right, or no, it's not that the government or whoever has never paid off scientists in the history of life. Like they totally have. And I will actually get to that in the Manson documentary next episode. But again, it's like, there are so many variables. So like, yes, if you start taking the birth control pill and you feel wonky in the head, yeah, you might think, oh my God, it must be the birth control pill. But I would also say, like, first of all, were there any other things that changed in your life? And two, like, can we look into this, additional theory where it's like, not that the birth control pill was doing anything or inherently changing, anything about your body's chemistry. It could have just pinged something that was latent in you to begin with. Again, just presenting options. Don't get mad. Don't shoot the messenger. Happy if you have medical background for you to email me additional things about this withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's go into these birth control studies. NPR absolutely killing it this week. This NPR article says there's a birth control backlash online. Can it explain the rise in abortions? This is by Selena Simmons Duffin. Right after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, there were many stories about how new state abortion bans were influencing people's birth control decisions, especially by prompting people to use long-acting or permanent options. Research shows that it wasn't just anecdotal, the trend was real. More people got intrauterine devices and implants for birth control, and procedures like vasectomies and tubal ligation spiked. These days, though, Dr. Caitlin Bernard, an OBGYN in Indianapolis who helps lead a statewide free birth control program, says her patients aren't talking much about the abortion ban that's been in place in the state for years. This is just the normal status quo now, says Bernard, who was involved in a high-profile abortion case soon after Roe was overturned. Other things that help you decide whether or not to use contraception are more top of mind. Bernard says patients are questioning things like whether they would rather take a pill or have an IUD, and whether their insurance would cover both options. She also sees patients worried about finances in general and trying to avoid going to the doctor to steer clear of unexpected medical bills. Contraception maligned. Bernard says there is one thing that is affecting her patients' decision-making more nowadays: social media and the rise of Make America Healthy Again. And just because something is Make America Healthy Again doesn't mean that it's branded as that, or that, like, this is how we're taking in medical information now. If you're doing the listening only version, I'm scrolling on my phone right now with my left hand. Or I'm pretending to scroll. Like, we're flipping through little 90-second short content. We know how important our health is, and how important it is that we treat our bodies, and how important it is that we do our own medical research before putting things in our bodies, even if it's prescribed by a doctor. So why the fuck are we all of a sudden ingesting things, even if they're seemingly harmless, like natural remedies and shit, that just some person who we've never met before, we don't know their credentials, we don't know their objective, we don't know how much they're making, we don't know who's telling them to say that, and we're just listening to them. They're saying, try some ashwagandha or whatever the fuck they're saying. You really got to look into this stuff. And trad wife influencers both deliver messages about hormonal birth control being bad for women. And it's easy to play into, right? Because these things are so easy when there's already a distrust, right? So what is 100% true is that historically the medical industry doesn't do the same level of research for women that it does for men, right? So that's a distrust that we kind of know and we all accept now. But now these capitalist fucking pigs, who are trad wife influencers, and MAHA. And I'm not saying, I think some people in MAHA genuinely I'm not saying I don't think that they're necessarily conspiracy theorists or charlatans. I actually think a lot of them are people who truly believe that we are being poisoned, by the government in some way through our food or something, which I think we are. I don't, but I think it's because of in a pursuit of money, not some not some kind of MK Ultra level plan to control our minds. I think it's a lot less sinister in that and a lot more money based. And so I think these are people who actually genuinely do want better options for themselves and their family, but then also, just like most of us, become distracted when they realize that sharing these beliefs online can make them a lot of money. Okay. These types of videos are all over social media. While research shows that hormonal birth control options are safe and that they're effective at preventing pregnancy, many of these videos exaggerate potential side effects and minimize the downside of non-hormonal birth control options. Most are posted by people who aren't medical professionals. There is definitely a social media phenomenon of wellness influencers with non-evidence-based personal experiences that are just ricocheting through the stratosphere, says Cynthia Harper, a contraception researcher at the University of California, San Francisco. That's overlapping with ideology and policy that women are supposed to be at home having a lot of babies, young, she says, referring to the pronatalist movement. And I'm talking about people who listen to me, follow me, my algorithm, which is absolutely the opposite of the pronatalist movement. And this backlash against hormonal birth control and the birth control pill at large have also had a lot of traction there, right? So it's not just this pursuit for this. It's both sides have distrust about how the medical industry has treated women, and you can turn that distrust into something that's super lucrative, and you can certainly makes it much easier to feed people ideas, whether or not those ideas actually have any medical backing. These two things have come together, and contraception has never been so maligned, she says. Harper adds that again, if you're someone who wants to nip this in the bud, I think the best way to approach it is actually not scientifically. I think it's historically. When you present to younger women the absolute amount of rights rights and political influence that increased for women at this when the birth control pill was released to the mass population. It absolutely changed history in a historical level as far as like women's participation in politics, in voting. And I think that's, even stronger to present. So it's like, well, of course we would like to villainize a pill that not only that a pill that basically increased political freedom and power for women. Like, I mean, can we think of like, this is something that fucking changed history. Harper adds that there are also political forces working against birth control access. The Trump administration has cut funding for reproductive health providers across the country and for the health system more broadly. Harper says those things have an impact. Everything I see points to lower access to contraception, she says. A twist after abortion bans, more abortions. Surprisingly, the number of abortions has actually gone up in the last few years as states have enacted bans. Could it be that the cultural push against birth control is leading to more unplanned or unwanted pregnancies and therefore more abortions? Harper thinks it's an intriguing hypothesis. To test it out, you'd have to do a study to survey people accessing abortion, she says, and ask if it was the restricted access to contraception that was the reason for the pregnancy that they're seeking abortion care for. Brittany it's Fredrickson, I think, but spelled really weird. A women's health policy researcher at the nonpartisan organization KFF does not think that shifts in birth control use explains recent abortion numbers. I actually think the number of abortions going up is likely just due to increased abortion accessibility, particularly with telehealth medication abortion, she says. In telehealth medication abortion, patients are able to get abortion pills from a pharmacy or in the mail after a telehealth visit. It has grown dramatically in popularity since becoming available during the COVID-19 pandemic. Right now, a high-profile legal case from Louisiana aims to remove that option for patients all over the country. As for the effect abortion bans have had on birth control, Fredrickson points to the Women's Health Survey KFF conducts every 2 years that asks about birth control use. In 2024, 82% of sexually active reproductive age women were using contraception. 6% were not using contraception. She says the rest were pregnant, trying to get pregnant, or unable to conceive. 82% of sexually active reproductive age women using contraception is a staggering number in a good way. KFF just fielded the survey again this year. I have given a brief look at the 2026 data, and it looks like the shares using contraception are pretty similar, she says. Fredrickson says cultural attitudes towards birth control and political forces are changing, and funding cuts that affect access are happening, though perhaps in ways that aren't visible in the data yet. So that's kind of just like, presenting this is what's happening online. These are some changes we think might, be the reasons why these things are happening. Then this second article is kind of about like, okay, the government's real role in this, right? We kind of we grazed this a little bit in the last article with the funding cuts for the Trump administration and stuff, but this is from The Intercept, and this goes into it a little bit more. Again, this is one of my passion topics. Alfred, you're here? Hello, my little love. Okay, this is from The Intercept. The Trump administration is overhauling birth control access for the pro-natalist movement. This is by Jessica Washington. Under RFK Jr., HHS is revamping a program that's supposed to fund contraceptives and sexual health care to please a far-right movement with roots in eugenics. The Trump administration is quietly turning a federal program designed to help lower-income Americans access birth control and other reproductive health services into an engine for pronatalism, a far-right movement with roots in eugenics that pushes people to have more babies, which is such a wild sentence for so many reasons. It's like, number one, of course, we have this federal program where we're actually supposed to be helping the people who need the help the most. And it really has this like whole political underbelly. And then secondly, it's like, this is a group of people who we continuously don't offer help to during parenthood. And I know people can be like, oh, well, these are the people who are going to be on welfare. Well, it's like, okay, well then fucking, yeah, because we're tricking them. That's maybe part of the reason that they need to be out, because they're having kids, because we're tricking them. On Thursday, the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Population Affairs published an updated notice of funding opportunity, first announced in April, for service providers to apply for grants through Title X, a federal program that provides low and no-cost birth control and other sexual and reproductive health services to roughly 2.8 million people every year. For months, the federal program had been plagued with uncertainty. Donald Trump eliminated Title X from his 2027 annual budget, and last year suddenly froze a large percentage of funds going to Title X recipients before eventually restoring the funding. But when providers opened the funding notice in April, instead of being met with relief, many were horrified to discover that Health and Human Services had a new mission in mind for the only federal program dedicated to providing contraceptives, getting women to have more babies. Grants funded through the program will help build body literacy. This is a quote. Address infertility, plan and space pregnancies, and navigate reproductive health conditions such as endometriosis and other conditions that affect infertility, the notice said. Contraceptives are hardly mentioned, except in a section on over-medicalization, which appears to commend the fact that reports have shown a decrease in females' current use of any contraception. That's interesting. That's interesting. Why that would be in a government program language. Okay. The notice is a part of a quiet but significant push to retool the Department of Health and Human Services into a weapon for a pronatalist movement seeped in the racist history of eugenics, which insists on the supposed biological superiority of white, straight, able-bodied people, and in the denial of women's bodily autonomy and right to exist outside of motherhood. Providers fighting back against the new requirements in court argue that this will further cede power over vulnerable communities' health to far-right actors inside the administration, like Assistant Secretary for Health Brian Christine, a former penile implant surgeon and anti-abortion crusader. Those are two great things for your resume, who is in charge of administering the Title X program. I would characterize it as really a shift toward this, and we haven't said this in a while, Project 2025 MAHA vision of prioritizing having babies over reproductive autonomy, said Amy Friedrich-Karnick, Director of Federal Policy at the Guttmacher Institute, a sexual and reproductive health research organization, and really undermining the program from top to bottom. The notice had previously included a pre-merits alignment review that will require all grantees to undergo an ideological audit by political appointees. Oh my God, this is so crazy. Based on their commitment to the administration's priorities, including ending diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, of course, file that under who could have guessed it, and gender affirming care, again, who could have guessed, even though the statute explicitly requires grantees to promote health equity and provide care to transgender recipients. However, it was later updated to remove the alignment review. Friedrich-Karnick and other sexual and reproductive health experts argue that under Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS is seeking to warp a public sexual health program to advance the goals of the administration's allies in the pronatalist movement ahead of the November midterms. Pronatalists harbor close ties and, in some cases, overlap with white Christian nationalists who want not only for there to be more babies, but also more white babies. The Department of Health and Human Services did not respond to the Intercept's request for comment. I mean, that article really, like, again, this is a topic I picked because it was something that was highly underreported in the past week or so. And I just find this trio of articles to be absolutely riveting, to say the least. And then the third one I have, again, this is the main topic, and I just really, really wanted to get into this. It's about misinformation, but it's about, harm towards women too, which is, two of my favorite topics. All right. So let's see. The light is changing because it's getting, that's the lowest it will go. The light's changing because the light's changing outside. All right. So this is from The Persistent, and I don't know that we've used The Persistent as a source before. So let me just do Persistent media source legit. Let's just do a quick little look into this, make sure. Okay, legitimate. And this is specifically a women's news source, so kind of something that I might use more on GWF. It was started by Francesca Donner, a highly reputable journalist who served as editor at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, although, that's language from their own website. So, but it does overall look like, and it looks like it's like persistent media bias. It looks like it's more of an academic kind of journal. All right. So this is this title from The Persistent is the popularity of the pill is plummeting at the exact moment it shouldn't be. And this is by Emma Haslat. This is from June of last year, but it just kind of, so it's a little older, but it kind of just wraps this up. I know we've read so many articles on this thing. I don't think this is one that we have read, though. I'm pretty sure not. Just like these pill pack picture art looks a little familiar, but I think that's just kind of like, it's just a little bit of a hack art here, because I don't think I've used The Persistent before. So birth control gave women control over their bodies, their careers, and their futures. A cultural campaign against the pills risks rolling all this back. And again, this is from last summer, but it's interesting to see the article that maybe warned us of this, and it seems to not really have gotten better now over a year later, right? In April 2021, as rumors swirled on social media about the supposed risks of the COVID vaccine, a doctor appealed on British breakfast television in an attempt to dispel the myths. Anthony Hardman, the deputy chair of Britain's Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, was frank. Yes, he admitted AstraZeneca's version of the vaccine had been shown to put a person's chances of getting a blood clot at about 1 in 250,000, but the risk was far lower than the chances of getting a blood clot while taking the oral contraceptive pill, which with a risk of at most 12 per 10,000 people is over 125 times higher. Hardman's point was that women take the pill, a medication so ubiquitous it has achieved one word or, well, two word status every day for years without worrying about their blood clot risk. Unfortunately, instead of calming the COVID anti-vaxxers, his words had the inverse effect of creating panic online about the pill itself. As I reported at the time, it was another episode in the pill's ongoing PR crisis. A study published in the British Medical Journal, BMJ, in January 2025 showed that between 2018 and 2023, the percentage of women using hormonal contraception had fallen from 18.8% to 11.3%. The trend is similar in the US, where the National Survey of Family Growth shows the percentage of women using the pill fell from 31% in 2002 to just 24% in 2017 to 2019. At the same time, influencers on social media, usually wellness focused, began advising women to give up the pill in favor of apps that supported the use of the rhythm method, which we now know they were using to track us and surveil us, which is another theme in the country and the world. This comes as reproductive rights are being systematically rolled back in the US since the fall of Roe v. Wade. As UK police have been given broader powers to examine the contents of women's cell phones for evidence they might have carried out an illegal abortion, as governments around the world are increasingly looking to exert control over women's bodies and raise birth rates. A broad rejection of a key form of contraception, which gives women maximal control over when and how they get pregnant, is a serious blow for women's reproductive rights. A magic pill. The oral contraception pill was first approved for birth control purposes by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in 1960, 8 years before the Summer of Love. A year later, 1961, it was made available to married women in the UK. The synthetic blend of progesterone and estrogen had been developed by the scientists Gregory Pincus, Min Chu Chang, and John Rock using a grant from Catherine McCormick. McCormick, the heir to the International Harvester fortune, had worked with Margaret Sanger to make Sanger's dream a magic pill that would prevent pregnancy a reality. By 1962, over 1 million women in the U.S. were taking oral contraceptives. By the 1990s, over 50 million women had used the pill. In 2019, figures from the UN showed 151 million women globally were on the pill, making it the fourth most used method of contraception after female sterilization condoms and the IUD. The pill didn't just give a woman control over her body, it gave her control over her future. Analysis by Claudia Goldin, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, and Lawrence Katz has suggested that the launch of the pill had a direct effect on the number of women joining professions like medicine and the law, because the pill enabled women to invest in expensive, long-duration training and not pay as high a price. That immediately increased women's participation in advanced track courses of study like medicine and the law. Women were 10% of first-year law students in 1970, but were 36% in 1980. The backlash begins. The backlash started in the 1970s. Well, of course it did, because they were like, oh no, women have more control and having a better time. Let's immediately stop this. When reports suggested that smoking and taking the pill could increase women's chances of getting a blood clot. In the 1980s, studies linked the pill with breast cancer, heart attacks, and stroke. In the 1990s, studies confirmed the link with breast cancer, although the amount of hormones in the pill have since been reduced, cutting that risk. The pill of the 1990s was very different than the current pill that we have available, says Dr. Jamie Trevino, a complex family planning specialist and a Darney Landy Fellow position at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. A political backlash peaked later. Although hormonal birth control has always been politicized, in 1968, Pope Paul VI finally ended speculation over the Vatican's stance on the pill by condemning it as sinful. Criticism of it from the Christian right increased during the first Obama administration, particularly after the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, expanding access to the medication to 63 million women by requiring employers to provide contraceptive coverage. Oh, yeah. So it's costing people money, of course. Anti-abortion groups referred to the legislation as a backdoor abortion mandate and called birth control pills life-ending drugs that have been deceptively labeled as contraceptive. Oh, boy. As a result of a court case brought by Hobby Lobby in 2014, the Supreme Court ruled certain business owners could refuse to buy insurance coverage that included contraception for their employees. And now, influencers have gotten involved. In the current propaganda I'm not falling for trend, influencers are listing birth control alongside tap water as things they feel they are being deceived over. It's not clear who is doing the deceiving. This is prolific. A study, and let's just take a moment. And, I live in New York, which is, a city, which is, arguably many people say the best tap water in the world. But and that's, the argument about why our bagels are so good over here. But let's just look into, is tap water safe to drink, USA? Yeah. I mean, right there, you say, about 90% of people, this is US only, get water from public utilities that test and treat water. This is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And public water systems follow a strict set of rules that are set by the EPA, which is the US Environmental Protections Agency, under the Safe Drinking Water Act, right? And so when you think of that, and then you compare it to bottled water, which is like, I guess, under the regulations only of the FDA. So is bottled water only regulated by FDA? Okay, so it's over. Okay, so actually, bottled water is not unsafe, but it's more that tap water is completely safe, and they've just kind of monetized your fear. So bottled water is regulated by the FDA because it's a packaged food product. It is also following the rules of the EPA because the EPA sets the baseline for drinking water standards that the FDA then must follow. So yes, bottled water is going through two levels of testing, or quality standards basically, but I feel like the FDA is not our most trustworthy source. I would go EPA over FDA, but that's just me. All right. This is prolific. A study of 50 YouTube videos, back to the article, posted by influencers with between 20,000 and 2 million subscribers, found that 74% were talking about discontinuing birth control. So it's the same shit, right? The same thing as we see left-leaning political influencers and right-leaning political influencers basically being paid to tell you the same information in a different package. It seems like the same thing is happening in the wellness communities, right? Because all of a sudden, this just thing enters the ether, and whether it's kind of like planned or people just see that this is a fear-based conversation that's really getting clicks and therefore getting money and followers, that everyone then starts making videos about it, right? I want to make videos about how it's completely safe to use birth control. Watch, you get 3 views. No one really wants the truth. They want the thing that sounds fun. Again, that ties so much into the Manson stuff that we'll talk about next week. So 74% were talking about discontinuing birth control, with 44% saying they were doing it to be, quote, more natural. Well, nothing more natural than having a kid you don't want. In April 2025, TikTok deleted almost 1,500 videos, 115 of which were tagged #birth control for misinformation around the subject, but not before the videos had been shared 21,000 times, reaching 15 million viewers. Some people feel mistrustful. Where's this mistrust coming from? One explanation might be that women's concerns over the pill haven't always been taken seriously by health professionals as they could have been, and that's coming back to bite us. Exactly what I was talking about earlier. They're just in women's health in general, right? There are nuanced conversations to be had around the pill, but unfortunately, there often isn't the time and appointments to discuss it, says Dr. Melanie Davis Hall, a medical director at The Lowdown, a site which allows women to review their form of contraception, and one of the authors of its book, Contraception. That's why some people feel mistrustful. We do need that information up front and the chance to ask those questions and have the risks explained. And the fact remains that there are risks to the pill. It does increase the chances of breast cancer and blood clots, though the risks of blood clots when you are pregnant are 25 times higher than when you're on the pill. Acne and mood swings are very real side effects, though weight gain is not. But the pill also has health benefits. One study found that a low 6.3% of breast cancers were attributable to the use of oral contraceptives, hormonal birth control had also potentially prevented about 57.3% of endometrial cancers. I would also like to see in this article, they're not citing where they're just kind of saying acne and mood swings are very real side effects, because on the flip side, like for me, I know like part of the reason that I went on birth control was because it actually curbs your acne. And all right, so again, crucially, it is also 99% effective at preventing pregnancy, which of course is the point. When misinformation thrives, when women's concerns are shut down by health professionals without a proper conversation, it creates the kind of knowledge gap where misinformation thrives. Same, right? This is why this ties so heavily into like more mainstream politics, right? Because misinformation thrives when our government doesn't give us honest answers to the questions that we ask. This knowledge gap has been seized on by anti-abortion and anti-contraceptive activists and has a distinctly MAHA vibe. While pill use has declined, so the number of women using the so-called fertility awareness method has grown. That's an amped up version of what used to be known as the rhythm method, and it has risen from 0.4% of women in 2018 to 2.5% in 2023. Under this method, women use apps to track their cycles using biomarkers like the consistency of their cervical mucus and their basal body temperature, which is your temperature at rest, to determine when they will ovulate, then avoid sex during the days around ovulation. This, without wishing to sound too conspiratorial, is exactly what a certain brand of conservative wants. Project 2025, for example, the 925-page framework for a second Trump presidency written by the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation, mentions fertility awareness no fewer than 8 times. Among those mentions are the arguments that the Centers for Disease Control should update its public messaging about the unsurpassed effectiveness of modern fertility awareness-based methods and family planning, while Health and Human Services should more thoroughly ensure that fertility awareness-based methods of family planning are part of women's preventative services. Jessica Valenti, who I know, who's been on GWF, the journalist behind the Abortion Everyday newsletter, notes it's a multi-pronged effort, years in the making. There's no one law, no singular campaign that will do away with birth control all at once. And that's what makes conservatives' plan so incredibly dangerous. Again, the right, we got to give them credit. They do make a good plan and they stick to it. She wrote in 2023, the slow and sly erosion of a longstanding right is much harder to spot than a single sweeping law. Either way, the result is the same. Death by 1,000 cuts still kills you in the end. An imperfect medication. The PR problem faced by the pill's proponents is that it is an imperfect medication. Its users report side effects they find unpleasant. Then again, that makes the pill no different from countless other medications. And like, okay, unpleasant, or is that like deeply affecting your life? Like at a certain point, again, what's more unpleasant than a kid you don't want? And pharmaceutical companies seem reluctant to further improve a medication that's more or less good enough. And you know what? That is the American way. Between 2017 and 2020, there were just 20 to 25 industry-funded clinical trials compared with 600 for cardiovascular drugs in just one of those years. And I mean, what a good thing to do if any of you listening are rich or end up being very wealthy, to fund medical trials for women's medicine, right? And operations on women, anything having to do with women. An off-cited statistic indicates that while pharma companies tend to put 20% of revenue for most drugs back into research and development, for contraception, the figure is just 2%. It's interesting that the decline in use of the pill and the trend for women in favor of natural methods of contraception has coincided with an increase in the popularity of hormone replacement therapy among older women. Dr. Janet Barter, president of the UK's Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Healthcare, suggests it's a generational thing. A more sinister read might suggest that encouraging women to use a natural method of contraception that may only be 76% effective may have its uses as fertility rates decline. And that's exactly why now might be the moment to remind ourselves that when the pill was first introduced, it gave women their own type of control over their own bodies, and by dint of that, over their own futures. At a time when everything feels quite out of control, this at least feels reassuring. All right, well, that's my whole main segment there, guys, my main stories. And I am gonna, I think, wrap up and move on to the next episode too, just for the sake of time. Again, doing a lot of recording today, but I was just so excited about these topics that we had to talk about today. I guess we'll just end, just because we've been following this, with one quick girl. And this is a very short Medium piece about, since we're going from kind of misinformation circulating online, we could take that as this theme. And I'm going to go into that theme just because, again, I know I talked about it last week, but I saw so much more of it this week. And that was just a lot more like misinformation, conspiracy theories, unfounded accusations against Patrick Clancy in this ongoing Lindsay Clancy postpartum psychosis trial. Oh, that also reminds me, I believe someone with a mental health psychosis insight. So just before I get into this real quickly, and there's articles to go along with this if you're interested in going into it a little bit more, but Wacko Maddie wrote in because she said, I wanted to provide some insight from a therapist. I am a first-year therapist, though have worked in community mental health for 3 years, including 2 years working inpatient. Psychosis causes brain damage. So anytime someone has a psychotic episode, their brain will never return back to pre-psychotic episode, especially when it is untreated. This is why early intervention is so important for people who struggle with psychotic disorders. And then she cites an article from the Michigan Medicine University. It's like michiganmedicine.org. And the article says, when reality fails, what to know about psychosis. So if you want to read more into this, we spent so much time on it last week. I'm not going to go into it more, but just as I know a lot of you were really interested in it. And then she goes on to say, there's also research coming out that menopause and psychosis are correlated due to hormonal changing. This might provide insight into postpartum psychosis. And then for that, she links to a psychiatry.cam.ac.uk article from the University of Cambridge that says psychosis and menopause, a hidden connection we need to talk about, right? I just wanted to point that out, since someone with a medical who is a therapist did write in for that. I thought that was interesting. Okay, now back to this Patrick Clancy conspiracy theory. Again, this is from the Medium, which, as we know, is basically a fucking glorified blog by Ted Bauer. He has 34,000 followers, so I guess he's a guy on here who likes to write a lot of Medium articles. Really no better than crowdsourcing an opinion, but I basically kind of did research on after seeing all these unfounded claims about and theories about from just people on the internet about how Patrick Clancy was framing Lindsay and that he actually killed the kids, or that he somehow was the voice that she was hearing and bullied her or brainwashed her into killing the kids. First of all, as again we'll learn in the Manson documentary, it's pretty hard to brainwash people. It's over time you can suggest things, but to actually brainwash people in the way that we know it from films and stuff is extremely hard. Therefore, my thought is for one person to convince another person to kill all their kids, even though it was done in the Manson family murders. Number one, that wasn't their children. They were, strangers to them, and much easier, I think, to kill a stranger than your own children. And then number two, there was copious amounts of LSD being used there, which I don't think that's come up in this trial. But again, so I kind of was looking, I was like, are there any actual real articles in any real news outlets that even pitch the theory that maybe Patrick Clancy had something to do with this more than he's letting on? And literally the only thing that that even comes up is this Medium article, again, a glorified fucking blog that says the Patrick Clancy conspiracy theories, and it's really just talking about the theories, right? So it says the ex-husband of Lindsay Clancy currently on trial for killing her 3 children. And again, as we talked about, I love blaming a man for life's woes more than anything else. I really do. Not in my own life, honestly. That's kind of like, I like to blame myself for my own problems, but like societal issues, I love blaming men for them, right? And so if even I don't think that Patrick Clancy is in the wrong in this situation, both when it comes to treatment of his wife or at the rate at which he remarried, I mean, I can't, that does say a lot. We're currently about to enter the 3rd week of the Lindsay Clancy trial, where the Duxbury, Massachusetts, and this was written 1 day ago, mom of 3 killed her kids. And the entire issue is about her postpartum depression and the meds she was on and how they interacted with each other, and who she told about her issues and who supported her and who didn't before this horrible thing happened. I mean, you can tell this is not a professionally written article. As such, there's been some debate about the role of Patrick Clancy, her husband at the time, and whether he can be viewed as a sympathetic figure. My 2 cents, oh God, he can for having his kids murdered. In any other way, not really. He's already testified and he's back in New York City with his new wife. This tragedy happened less than 4 years ago. Right. But I mean, everyone moves on at different paces. And again, like, what is he supposed to do? Just think about it until he kills himself? I mean, I don't really know what you do with that. Oh, and a new baby. And you just hope he didn't hop back on the hedonistic middle-class 30-something treadmill. And the same shit is about to happen all over again, ideally with an outcome involving better meds. Because the internet likes theories, we have 2 ones that have cropped up around the Lindsay Patrick interaction around the time of these murders. Theory 1 is that Patrick somehow framed Lindsay. The basis of this theory is that apparently, if you look at Patrick's Instagram history, oh my God, he followed and liked some stuff of his now wife before this happened. And he was apparently traveling quite a bit for work, including to NYC in the 4 months prior to this tragedy. So this theory says maybe he fell in love with his current wife. He wanted his existence and then wife and 3 kids to be out of the picture. And so he let Lindsay slide so that she'd do this type of act. Seems far-fetched, but it's out there. What I don't push back against is like, okay, I would believe that Patrick knew that his new wife existed. Again, common GWF theory, no matter how long you're in a relationship, even if it's a marriage, I think that most people know who, if they were to leave that marriage or relationship, their first option to run to would be. I think a lot of people know that. I don't want to say it's specific to men because I think women have it too. Again, if you're at home and you're like, oh, there's no one I think about except for my husband. Okay. I mean, maybe you live in a boring area. I don't know. But I think most people have another option on the table. And not an option that they do anything with, not an option they talk to, but just someone who they're like, if anything ever fell apart, I would pursue this person. Your second theory, which I find semi-believable, but probably not the real thing, is that Lindsay resented Patrick for 3 kids. She has written in her phone that she only wanted 1 and feared she couldn't love any others like the first. And so she killed her kids to get back at Patrick for forcing pregnancies on her. I don't buy that one either, to be honest, but it's closer for me. Plenty of people kill their kids because they despise their ex. Yeah, but usually men do that, or current husband or wife so much. We see this shit all the time. We just recently had one in New York State, and then he links to hating your ex more than you love your kids. And this is about the Sarah Myers case. Okay, which I think a woman does kill in that one, but obviously they're going to find a female example. I don't think either is the correct theory, but they're worth floating out there too. So again, yeah, it's always worth floating out some misinformation. Again, I just think that, like, first of all, it's like this is a super high profile case. You think that if either of these were feasible, no one on the legal team would have brought this up. You guys think you on TikTok, again, who's watched 3 episodes of Special Victims Unit, you think you're better than the both the prosecution and the defense? Like, what are we talking about here? Not one fucking article that's legitimate that I could find. And I'm not saying people who listen to the show, you guys weren't presenting this to me. I've just seen so much of this presented to me on my Instagram that it was driving me a little bit fucking nuts. And again, a bit of a sore spot for me because of just like people are treated so poorly when they're going through their grief. And I'm going to even extend that empathy to Patrick Clancy, even though he is a man. All right. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm sorry I can't be with you for the next 2 weeks, but make sure to share this episode. I hope you enjoy it. If you have anything in the meantime, email me withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to that patreon.com/withoutacountry. And if you join it in the next 2 weeks, you will be shouted out, but just not until I'm back on the live stream because I'm pre-recording. But I really, really appreciate so much every time someone joins. It really helps the show go so much more than I can even tell you. Like, I really, really appreciate it. And then, of course, if you are in Glasgow, I am going to be performing stand-up comedy one night, one show only in Glasgow at the Blackfriars of Bell Street. And that is on Friday, the 14th of August. And then Los Angeles. I know last week I said there was 5 tickets left. They keep like adding tickets. The Comedy Store ticketing is very weird. As of me starting recording, there was 12 tickets left to the show. But like last night there was 18 tickets. So they are moving fast. So again, Los Angeles Gash at the Comedy Store happening on Sunday, October 25th. Make sure to get the tickets to that ASAP if you want to have insured entry, because I'm not sure that we'll be able to move it to the bigger room. I hope we can. I'll have to talk to everyone there upon sellout. And yeah, Mike, how can people support you?
Well, Twitter and Instagram at the M Harrington. Next, Armored League. We're not back for like another month. It's going to be September 17th at Melrose Ballroom. Get tickets at thearmoredleague.com.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I mean, remember, the truth is in there, and I'll talk to you next week for our Charles Manson Chaos MK Ultra documentary evergreen episode. Haven't done one of those in a long time, so I hope you're interested in that. Bye.
Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive.